close your eyes and let yourself drift to a place where the moonlight filters through ancient trees, where pages whisper secrets to the wind, and where time moves at its own peculiar pace. This is a story about finding peace, not in rushing, but in choosing when to begin the journey. Settle into your pillow, breathe deeply, and let us wander together into the forest. Once upon a time, in a grove where silver birches grew in spirals and moss covered everything like velvet, there stood a library unlike any other. It was built into the hollow of an enormous oak tree, its shelves carved from the living wood itself, its windows cut like gentle eyes that watched the forest with patient kindness.
The library belonged to everyone and no one, open to all creatures who sought its wisdom. And every evening, as the last rays of sunlight painted the sky in shades of lavender and gold, a tortoise named Everett would arrive to begin his watch. Everett was a creature of considerable thoughtfulness. His shell was the color of old parchment, marked with rings that told of many seasons. He moved with deliberate grace, each step a meditation, each breath intentional. The forest creatures admired him greatly, for he had a way of making others feel truly seen when they spoke to him. But Everett carried a small, persistent shadow. No matter how early he intended to leave his burrow, no matter how carefully he planned, he always arrived just a few minutes late. Not catastrophically late, not rudely late, but perpetually, predictably late. 5 minutes, 7 minutes, sometimes 12.
Each evening followed the same gentle pattern. Everett would wake in his burrow as the afternoon sun slanted through the entrance. He would think to himself that today would be the day he arrived on time. He would eat his carefully prepared dinner of clover and wild strawberries. He would choose which book to read during the quiet hours. He would polish his spectacles with a soft cloth made from dandelion silk. And then, just as he was about to leave, he would remember something. A letter he meant to write. A thought he needed to capture in his journal. A neighbouring mouse who needed advice about a leaking roof. Everett never rushed. Rushing, he believed, was antithetical to his nature. So he would attend to these small matters with his characteristic care, confident that a few minutes would not matter in the vast expanse of time. The hedgehog who kept the day watch would always wait for him, patient but increasingly tired, her quills drooping with exhaustion. She never complained, but Everett could see the weariness in her eyes. He could sense how his lateness rippled outward, affecting her evening, her rest, her own small joys.
One particular evening, Everett arrived at the library to find the hedgehog already gone. In her place was a note, written in her neat, careful script. Had to leave at closing time tonight. Doctor's appointment for my mother. The Crane family was hoping to borrow the Book of Tides for their daughter's coming-of-age ceremony tomorrow. It's on the hold shelf. Everett's heart sank as he read the second note, this one from the Cranes. We waited as long as we could. We'll try again tomorrow, though the ceremony is at dawn. Thank you for trying. The Book of Tides was no ordinary book. It appeared in the library only once each generation, carried on wind and chance, and it vanished just as mysteriously. It contained stories of transformation, stories of finding one's current in the great ocean of life. For a young crane preparing for her first solo flight across the vast waters, it would have been a treasure. Everett stood in the doorway, the book still waiting on the hold shelf, and felt something shift in his chest. Not guilt exactly, but a gentle awareness, like the first crack of dawnlight against a window. His lateness had not caused a disaster. The ceremony would still happen. The young crane would still take her flight, but something small and meaningful had been lost. A moment of magic, a thread of connection, a gift he could have given had he simply arrived when he said he would. That night, Everett sat at the library's ancient desk and thought. The moonlight pooled around him like spilled milk, and the books seemed to breathe in the silence, their pages rustling with unspoken wisdom. He realized something curious. He never felt rushed when he finally arrived at the library. Once here, time expanded. He moved through his duties with peaceful attention, checking the stacks, helping late-night readers, mending torn pages with infinite care. The hurry lived only in the narrow space between his intention and his action, in the gap where he convinced himself that later was the same as now. What if, he wondered, he left earlier not to rush, but to move through the world with the same peace he felt once he arrived? The next evening, Everett did something different. When he woke, instead of lingering over his dinner, he ate mindfully but efficiently. Instead of reading 3 chapters, he read 1, slowly, letting the words sink deep. Instead of attending to every small task that arose, he wrote them in a small notebook, for tomorrow. And then, with time still stretching before him, he left. The forest in the early evening was a revelation. The light held a quality he had forgotten, golden and thick as honey. He heard the wood thrushes singing their vespers, their melody rising and falling like a prayer. He saw a family of rabbits playing in a meadow he usually passed in dimness. He felt no urgency, no pressure, only presence. When he arrived at the library, the hedgehog was still there, her face bright with surprise. "Everett, you're early." On time, he corrected gently, with a small smile. They stood together for a moment, and Everett realized that this, too, was a gift. A few minutes to share the transition between day and night, to ask after the hedgehog's mother, to stand in companionship rather than transaction. Days became weeks. Everett continued his experiment, not rigidly, not perfectly, but with growing understanding. He discovered that leaving early did not mean abandoning his thoughtfulness. It meant carrying his intentionality forward into time itself, treating his commitments with the same care he treated his conversations, his reading, his life. Some evenings he arrived with time to spare and would sit outside the library, watching the forest settle into its nocturnal rhythms. Some evenings, unexpected delays still arose, but now he had a cushion, a buffer of grace that absorbed them without creating ripples in others' lives. The hedgehog began to flourish. She had time to visit her garden in the evening light. She took up painting, creating small watercolors of sunset scenes. She seemed lighter, happier, her quills gleaming with vitality. Other changes followed, subtle but real. The library became a place of even greater peace. Creatures began arriving earlier themselves, knowing Everett would be there, ready to help them find exactly the right book for their exact right moment. The space held a new quality of reliability, of promises kept. One evening, months into his practice of leaving early, Everett arrived at the library to find an unusual visitor. A young crane with feathers that shimmered like water under moonlight. "Mr. Everett," she said, her voice musical and shy. "My parents told me about you, about the Book of Tides." "I'm so sorry," Everett began, the old regret rising. "I was late that evening and you couldn't—" "No," she interrupted gently. "I came to thank you. Because we couldn't get the book, my mother told me the stories instead. The ones she remembered from when she was my age. And my father added his stories and his father's stories. We stayed up all night, the three of us, and I learned that the tides are not just in books, but in us, in the memories we carry forward." She paused, her dark eyes bright. "But I also came because I heard something changed for you, and I wanted you to know that your change changed things for others too. The hedgehog told my mother, who told the rabbits, who told the deer. And now more creatures are arriving when they say they will, and it's like the whole forest is breathing more easily." Everett felt tears gather in his eyes, though he could not quite say why. Perhaps because he understood, finally, that respecting time was not about rigidity or pressure. It was about love, about honoring the invisible threads that connected him to every other being, about understanding that his choices rippled outward in ways he might never fully see. And so Everett continued his watch, night after night, season after season. His shell grew a few more rings. His spectacles needed stronger lenses. But his heart grew lighter with each choice to leave early, to begin the journey with space and grace, to treat time itself as a gift
to be honoured rather than a constraint to be resented. He learned that calm preparedness was not the enemy of spontaneity, but its foundation. That the peace he felt at the library could extend backward into his whole day if he let it. That leaving early was not about arriving early, but about moving through the world without the low hum of anxious lateness, without the mental clutter of promises half kept. The forest library still stands in its grove of spiral birches, its windows watching the world with patient kindness. And every evening, as the sky turns lavender and gold, a tortoise arrives to begin his watch, bringing with him not just his thoughtfulness and care, but his respect for time, for others, for the sacred space between intention and action. Some nights, when sleep comes slowly to the creatures of the forest, they think of Everett and his gentle lesson. They think about what it means to leave early, not as a sacrifice, but as a gift to themselves and others. They consider the mental peace that comes from honouring the commitments they make, the freedom found not in having no schedule, but in respecting the one they choose. And in the morning, when they wake to bird song and possibility, they find themselves beginning a little sooner, moving a little more intentionally, carrying forward the wisdom of a tortoise who learned that respecting time was, in the end, a form of respecting life itself. The forest sighs in contentment. The moon watches from above, and somewhere in the distance, a young crane takes flight across vast waters, her wings strong, her heart sure, carrying stories both old and new toward whatever shore awaits. Sleep now, dear listener. Let Everett's peace become your peace. Let his journey remind you that there is freedom in choosing to begin, wisdom in leaving early, and grace in honouring the time you are given and the time you share with others. The library's light glows softly in the darkness. The books hold their wisdom in silence. And you, like all who visit this magical place, are exactly where you need to be. Rest well. Dream deeply. Tomorrow, you too can choose to leave a little early and see what gifts the journey brings.